When the elegant cream envelope arrived in the mail, I expected nothing but joy. After all, my brother Ryan was finally marrying his girlfriend of 3 years, and our family had been anticipating the announcement. But as I opened the invitation, my smile faded. There, printed in gold calligraphy, was only my name. Not Mark and Sarah Johnson, just Mark Johnson. I checked the envelope again, thinking it must be a mistake. When I called Ryan to politely point out the error, his response left me speechless. "It is not a mistake, Mark. Sarah is not invited to the wedding." His voice was firm, unapologetic. The brother I had grown up with, shared everything with, was deliberately excluding my wife of 5 years from one of the most important days of his life. Before I tell you what happened next, and the shocking reason behind this decision, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever had to navigate complicated family dynamics. Growing up in suburban Boston, Ryan and I were the typical brother duo, with just enough of an age gap to make things interesting. He was 3 years older, just enough to be cooler, but still willing to let his little brother tag along most of the time. Our childhood home was filled with memories of backyard baseball games, building snow forts during harsh New England winters, and summer camping trips with Dad, where we would compete to see who could catch the biggest fish. "You boys are going to be best friends for life," Mom would often say, smiling as she patched up scraped knees or broke up the occasional brotherly squabble. For the most part, she was right. Even through the awkward teenage years, our bond remained strong. Ryan was the more outgoing one captain of the swim team and homecoming king his senior year. I was quieter, more academic, preferring books and computer games to the social spotlight. Despite our differences, we respected each other. When bullies targeted me in middle school, it was Ryan who stepped in his popularity, a shield that extended to protect me. "Nobody messes with my brother," he told me, after confronting the worst of the bullies. It became something of a family motto between us. College created our first real separation. Ryan attended UCLA on a partial swimming scholarship, while I stayed closer to home at Boston University. The distance changed our relationship in subtle ways. Weekly phone calls gradually became monthly. Holiday reunions were warm but briefer, as Ryan built a life on the West Coast. After graduation, Ryan landed a job with a tech startup in San Francisco and settled there permanently. I took a position with a financial firm in Boston, staying close to our parents and childhood friends. We still made efforts to visit each other, but our lives were moving in different directions. 3 years ago, Ryan met Jessica at a charity event his company sponsored. Their connection was immediate. "She is the one Mark," he told me during a rare late-night phone call, his voice filled with the kind of certainty I had only heard from him a few times before. Within 6 months, they had moved in together. My relationship with Sarah had followed a very different path. We met by chance at a coffee shop near my office during a thunderstorm that had us both stranded without umbrellas. I offered to share my newspaper as a makeshift shield to her car, and she countered by suggesting we wait out the storm over coffee. Sarah was unlike anyone I had dated before. Where I was cautious and planned everything, she was spontaneous and embraced uncertainty. Her work as a freelance graphic designer gave her a creative perspective that balanced my analytical mindset perfectly. "We fit together because we are so different," she would say, laughing as she pulled me into another adventure I would never have chosen for myself. After just 7 months of dating, we eloped to Vermont during peak fall foliage season. The decision shocked everyone, especially my family. I had always been the predictable one, the planner who weighed every option carefully. Marrying someone after knowing them less than a year seemed wildly out of character. "Are you sure about this?" Ryan asked during our first video call after the wedding. "You barely know her." His concern seemed reasonable at the time. Our parents were similarly surprised, but quickly embraced Sarah, charmed by her warmth and the obvious happiness she brought me. Ryan, however, remained distant during her first family Christmas, polite, but reserved in a way that seemed unlike him. I attributed his behavior to the fact that he and Jessica could not make it home that year due to work commitments. They sent gifts and video called during dinner, but the conversation felt strained whenever Sarah spoke. I dismissed it as the awkwardness of getting to know someone through a screen. The following summer, Ryan and Jessica visited Boston for a week. It should have been the perfect opportunity for everyone to bond. But there was an undeniable tension whenever Sarah and Jessica were in the same room. They were unfailingly polite to each other, but something felt off. "Is everything okay between you and Jessica?" I asked Sarah, after a particularly quiet dinner. "Of course," she replied too quickly. "She seems great. I am just tired from work. Ryan was similarly evasive when I questioned him during a brothers-only fishing trip. Jessica is just shy around new people, he claimed, though Jessica had shown no signs of shyness in other social situations I had observed. As their visit continued, I noticed Ryan creating situations that separated Sarah from group activities. A baseball game where he had accidentally purchased one too few tickets. A reservation at Jessica's favorite restaurant that somehow could not accommodate an extra person at the last minute. When I confronted him about these coincidences, he brushed it off. "You are imagining things, Mark. Not everything is about Sarah." The comment stung primarily because it suggested there was something to imagine in the first place. I let it go, chalking it up to the stress of planning activities for everyone. After they returned to California, communication with Ryan became increasingly sporadic. Our monthly calls dwindled to holidays and birthdays. When they announced their engagement last Christmas via a family Zoom call, Sarah was working late and missed it entirely. Ryan seemed relieved rather than disappointed by her absence. "Your brother does not like me," Sarah said one night after I mentioned Ryan had called while she was in the shower. "He has never liked me." "That is ridiculous," I replied, though. A part of me wondered if she might be right. "He just does not know you well enough yet." But as I thought back over the past few years, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Ryan had never made a genuine effort to know my wife, despite how important she was to me. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday in April. The ceremony was planned for June at a vineyard in Napa Valley, a destination event requiring significant travel for most guests. I stared at my name alone on the thick cardstock for several minutes before reaching for my phone. Ryan answered on the third ring, his voice casual, as if he had been expecting my call. "Hey, just got your invitation. There seems to be a mistake." I began keeping my tone light. "Sarah's name is missing." A pause then. "It is not a mistake, Mark. Sarah is not invited to the wedding." The bluntness of his statement left me momentarily speechless. "What? Why, it is complicated," he replied, his voice dropping slightly. "Jessica and I decided to keep our guest list very selective." "I'm sorry. Selective, Ryan. She is my wife. How can you invite me but not her?" "That makes no sense." He sighed heavily. "Look, I do not want to get into this over the phone. It is Jessica's special day, and we both agreed on the guest list." "So this is Jessica's decision," I pressed, anger beginning to replace shock. "It is our decision," he corrected firmly, "and I would really appreciate if you would respect it. You are my brother, and I want you there. But Sarah cannot come. That is final." The call ended with tension hanging between us, unresolved and festering. When I told Sarah about the conversation, her reaction surprised me. Instead of anger, her face showed resignation. "I told you he does not like me," she said quietly, setting aside the book she had been reading. "Are you going to go without me?" "Of course not," I replied immediately. "It is ridiculous and insulting. If you are not welcome, then neither am I." Sarah shook her head. "No, Mark. He is your brother. You should be there. And leave my wife behind because of some unexplained decision. That is not happening." The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. What could possibly justify excluding you specifically? "Maybe you should find out," Sarah suggested, her voice carefully neutral, "before you make any decisions." That night, we argued for the first time in months. Sarah insisted I should attend, regardless that missing my only brother's wedding was something I would regret. I maintained that her exclusion was a line that should not be crossed, a deliberate insult I could not overlook. "There has to be a reason," Sarah kept saying. "People do not make decisions like this randomly." Her persistence in encouraging me to attend without her began to trigger a new worry. Did she know something I did not? Was there a reason? She seemed almost relieved not to be invited. The next day, I called my mother, hoping for some insight. Mom had always been the diplomatic center of our family, the peacemaker who could explain one brother's actions to the other. "I think you should talk to Ryan directly," she said, after an uncomfortable silence. "It is not my place to get involved." "Mom, you are already involved. This is a family wedding, and my wife has been specifically excluded. You must know why." Her continued evasiveness only fueled my determination to understand what was happening. Next, I reached out to my cousin David, who had always been close to Ryan. Man, I really cannot get in the middle of this, he said, sounding genuinely uncomfortable. But maybe consider that there is history you might not know about. What history? Between whom? I pressed. Just talk to Ryan, okay? Or maybe Sarah. That cryptic comment sent a chill through me. Why would David suggest talking to Sarah unless she knew something relevant to the situation? My final call was to Ryan's best friend Tyler, who was serving as best man. Tyler and I had maintained a friendly relationship over the years, occasionally meeting up when he visited Boston. Look, Mark, I care about you and Ryan both, he said after I explained the situation. All I can say is that Jessica and Sarah in the same room on Jessica's wedding day would be a disaster waiting to happen, and not because of anything recent. His emphasis on recent caught my attention immediately. What does that mean? Did something happen between them in the past? I have already said too much. Talk to your brother or your wife, preferably both. By the time I hung up, the vague outlines of a situation were forming in my mind, none of the possibilities pleasant. I texted Ryan insisting on a face-to-face conversation. To my surprise, he agreed to a video call the following evening. That night, I lay awake beside Sarah watching her sleep and wondering what secrets might lie between us. 5 years of marriage, and suddenly, I felt like there was a chapter of her life I knew nothing about. The video call with Ryan was set for 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. his time in California. I chose to take it in my home office away from Sarah, who had conveniently mentioned a dinner with colleagues that would keep her out late. Ryan's face appeared on my screen, tired and tense. The easy smile that had always been his trademark was nowhere to be seen. I appreciate you making time for this. I began trying to keep my tone conciliatory despite my simmering frustration. But I need to understand what is happening here. He ran a hand through his hair. A nervous gesture I recognized from childhood. I was hoping you would just accept the invitation as it was. How could I possibly do that? My wife has been deliberately excluded from my brother's wedding with no explanation. Do you realize how hurtful that is? It is not about hurting you or Sarah, he countered. It is about making sure Jessica has the perfect day she deserves. And Sarah's presence would prevent that. How exactly? Ryan looked away from the camera, visibly uncomfortable. Mark, some things are better left in the past. Apparently not, since they are affecting the present pretty significantly. Everyone I talk to hints at some history I do not know about. Between whom? Sarah and Jessica. You and Sarah. What am I missing here? If Sarah has not told you, maybe it is not my place to. That confirmation that there was something to tell ignited a flare of anger. I am not playing this game anymore, Ryan. Either you tell me what is going on, or I am not coming to your wedding. Period. The ultimatum hung between us, digital pixels, carrying the weight of a potential fracture in our relationship. Finally, Ryan sighed deeply. Fine. But remember, you insisted on knowing. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. Jessica and Sarah knew each other before either of us met them. They were roommates in college for 2 years. This was surprising, but hardly scandalous. And Sarah never mentioned knowing Jessica, but people lose touch with college roommates all the time. They were more than roommates, Mark. They were best friends, inseparable. Another pause, longer this time. Until Sarah slept with Jessica's fiancé the week before their wedding. The words landed like a physical blow. What? That cannot be true. Sarah would never. It is true, Ryan interrupted firmly. Jessica came home early from a bachelorette weekend to find them together. The wedding was called off. Jessica dropped out of school for a semester. Sarah transferred to another college. They have not spoken since. My mind reeled trying to reconcile this information with the woman I had married. Sarah, who volunteered at animal shelters, who cried during sad commercials, who had always emphasized honesty in our relationship. This same woman had betrayed her best friend in the most devastating way possible. Why would Sarah never tell me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Probably because she is ashamed, or because she knew you might run into Jessica someday through me. I do not know, Mark. But when I met Jessica and eventually heard this story, saw pictures from their college days, and realized who your wife was, I could not believe the coincidence. Does Jessica know that Sarah is my wife? Ryan nodded grimly. She figured it out the first time I showed her pictures of our family Christmas, the one Sarah missed. She recognized her immediately. That is why things have been so strained. Jessica has tried to be civil for my sake, for your sake, but asking her to welcome Sarah at our wedding is just too much. The pieces were falling into place. The tension during visits, the awkward video calls, Ryan's increasing distance. It had nothing to do with his feelings about my quick marriage and everything to do with who I had married. I am sorry you had to find out this way, Ryan added, when I remained silent. But now maybe you understand our decision. I ended the call shortly after my thoughts, a chaotic jumble. The brother who had always protected me had kept this secret to protect someone else, his fiancée. And my wife, the woman who shared my bed and my life, had kept her own secrets. When Sarah returned from dinner, I was waiting in the living room, the wedding invitation on the coffee table between us, like physical evidence of the conversation we needed to have. How was dinner? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Good, she replied, setting down her purse. We finalized the design for the Roberts account. That is nice. I gestured to the space beside me on the couch. We need to talk. She sat cautiously, her eyes finding the invitation. You spoke with Ryan. Yes, and he told you about Jessica and me. It was not a question, but a statement. The confirmation that she knew exactly what Ryan would have told me sent a fresh wave of hurt through my chest. Why did you never tell me? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. 5 years of marriage, and I had to hear from my brother that my wife once betrayed her best friend in the worst possible way. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, pain etching lines around her mouth that I had never noticed before. I have wanted to tell you so many times. When you first mentioned Ryan was dating someone named Jessica, I thought it might be a coincidence. California is a big place. But when you showed me their engagement photo, she trailed off, shaking her head. You knew for certain then, and still said nothing. What was I supposed to say? By the way, I destroyed your future sister-in-law's life 10 years ago. Would that have made anything better? There was a defensive edge to her voice that I had rarely heard. Better than lying by omission. Better than letting me walk into family gatherings blind. I stood up, unable to contain my agitation. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? Like I married someone without knowing who she really is. It was one terrible mistake I made when I was 21. Sarah replied, her voice rising to match mine. One awful decision that I have regretted every day since. It does not define who I am. Then why hide it? Why let me find out this way? She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. Because I was afraid. Afraid you would look at me exactly the way you are looking at me right now, like you do not recognize me anymore. The raw honesty in her voice punctured some of my anger. I sat back down, creating space between us on the couch. Tell me what happened, I said finally. The whole story. No more secrets. Sarah took a deep breath. Jessica was my best friend from freshman year. We did everything together. Junior year, she started dating Michael. He proposed at the beginning of senior year, and they planned a wedding for right after graduation. She paused, twisting her wedding ring, my ring around her finger. I was maid of honor. I helped plan everything. But Michael and I, there was always this attraction. We never acted on it, never even acknowledged it, until the week before the wedding. And then Jessica was away for her bachelorette weekend. Michael came by to drop off some wedding stuff. We had wine. Too much wine. One thing led to another. She shook her head, visibly disgusted with herself. Jessica came home early and found us. It was the worst moment of my life. The look on her face, I will never forget it. What happened after the wedding was called off. Jessica wanted nothing to do with either of us, understandably. I transferred to finish my degree elsewhere. Michael and I never spoke again. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. I have spent years trying to make up for that night, trying to be a better person. When I met you, it felt like a second chance I did not deserve. We talked for hours, painful truth after painful truth emerging. How Sarah had tried to apologize to Jessica multiple times over the years, only to be blocked at every turn. How the guilt had led her to therapy. How she had recognized Jessica's name when I first mentioned Ryan's girlfriend, but convinced herself it had to be a different Jessica. I should have told you, she admitted as dawn approached. I was just so afraid of losing you, and now I asked, emotionally drained, but clearer-headed than I had been hours before. What do we do about the wedding? Sarah wiped her eyes. You go. Support your brother. I have no place there, and we both know it. And us. What does this mean for us? She reached for my hand hesitantly. That depends on whether you can forgive me. Not just for what I did to Jessica, but for not being honest with you from the beginning. The question hung between us as the first light of morning filtered through our blinds. The decision about Ryan's wedding was ultimately simpler than the larger questions facing our marriage. I would attend alone, respecting Jessica's understandable desire not to have Sarah present on her wedding day. It was the least I could do after learning the full history between them. Are you sure? I asked Sarah the night before my flight to California about me going. She nodded, helping me pack my suit for the ceremony. Completely sure. Ryan is your brother. This rift between us should not extend to you two. The week had been difficult, filled with long conversations and painful realizations. Sarah had revealed other secrets, smaller ones, but significant nonetheless. How she had initially approached me at that coffee shop because she had seen me in pictures on Ryan's social media and recognized me as Jessica's new boyfriend's brother. How our chance meeting had not been chance at all, but a deliberate attempt to learn more about Jessica's life from a safe distance. I never expected to fall in love with you, she insisted. That part was real. Is real. I believed her, though trust had become a fragile thing between us. We had started couples counseling, a neutral space to rebuild what had been damaged by years of omission. The wedding itself was beautiful, set among rolling vineyards with mountains in the distance. Ryan seemed relieved when I arrived alone, though he asked carefully about Sarah. We are working through things, I told him. It is complicated. I am sorry it turned out this way, he said, straightening his tie before the ceremony. For what it is worth, I think Sarah truly regrets what happened. Jessica just cannot have her here. Too many memories. I understood completely. Watching Jessica walk down the aisle toward my brother, her face radiant with happiness, I felt a profound sadness for what might have been. In another universe, Sarah would be seated beside me, our hands linked as we celebrated this union. Jessica would have no reason to ban her former best friend from her special day. At the reception, after several glasses of champagne had loosened inhibitions, Jessica approached me directly for the first time. Thank you for coming, she said, elegant, in her white gown, and thank you for understanding why it had to be just you. Of course, I replied. Congratulations. You and Ryan seem perfect together. She studied me for a moment. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded, bracing myself. Do you think people can truly change after they do something unforgivable? The question carried the weight of a decade of pain. I considered my answer carefully, thinking of the woman I had left back in Boston, the woman whose tears had soaked my shirt night after night as she confronted her past mistakes. I think people can grow, I said finally, learn from their worst moments, become better than they were. Whether that warrants forgiveness depends on the person who was hurt. Jessica nodded slowly. Ryan says she makes you happy. She does, I answered honestly. Though right now we are figuring out what honesty really means in a marriage. I hope you find your way through it, she said, surprising me. Not for her sake. For yours. With that, she returned to the dance floor, where Ryan waited, leaving me with a complexity of emotions I had not anticipated. The flight home gave me time to reflect on everything that had happened. The shocking revelation, the painful conversations with Sarah, the glimpses of compassion from both Ryan and Jessica, despite their justified anger. Most importantly, my own feelings about the woman I had married. Did one terrible mistake from a decade ago define who Sarah was? Did her failure to disclose that past negate the 5 years of love and support she had given me? These were not simple questions with easy answers. When I landed in Boston, Sarah was waiting at the arrival gate, uncertainty written across her features. I had told her not to come, that I would take a cab, but there she was anyway. How was it? She asked, as we walked to the parking garage. Beautiful. Emotional. Strange to be there without you. She nodded, keeping a careful distance between us as we walked. And Ryan, Jessica? They seem very happy. Ryan asked about you. And Jessica, I hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. She asked if I thought people could change after doing something unforgivable. Sarah stopped walking. What did you tell her? That I believe people can grow and learn from their worst moments. I turned to face her fully. The question is whether that growth warrants forgiveness. And does it? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Do I deserve your forgiveness, Mark? The parking garage was hardly the place for this conversation, but perhaps there would never be a perfect moment for such fundamental questions. I think I said slowly that we build our lives choice by choice, day by day. The person you were 10 years ago made a terrible choice. But the person you have been with me, despite your omissions, has been loving, supportive, and kind. But is that enough? She pressed. I reached for her hand, linking our fingers together for the first time since the revelation. I do not know yet, but I am willing to find out if you are. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. A willingness to see beyond the worst mistake of her life to the person she had become, to the marriage we had built now with a more complete understanding of each other's pasts. As we drove home, I realized that Ryan's wedding had marked more than his new beginning with Jessica. It had forced a reckoning in my own marriage, painful but perhaps necessary. The secrets that had lurked beneath the surface were now exposed to light, creating the possibility for deeper honesty between Sarah and me. Whether our marriage would ultimately survive remained uncertain. Trust once broken requires painstaking effort to rebuild. But sitting beside Sarah, as we navigated the familiar roads home, I felt a cautious hope. The path forward would not be easy, but at least now we were walking it with our eyes open. Have you ever discovered a secret about your partner that made you question everything about your relationship? How did you decide whether to forgive and move forward or walk away? Leave a comment below sharing your experience. If this story of complicated family dynamics and difficult choices resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about relationships tested by the past. Share this video with someone who might be struggling with forgiveness or honesty in their own life. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the most painful revelations can lead to deeper understanding and stronger connections if we have the courage to face them together.